This show is part of the HeadStuff podcast network.
This episode of The G-Spot is sponsored by Playblue, Ireland's favourite adult store. Playblue.ie has a huge selection of adult toys as well as some deadly deals. There really is something for everyone, no matter what bits you have or what you're into. Check out playblue.ie today.
I'm Grace Alice. I'm a sex and intimacy coach, and you've just found The G-Spot, my podcast with the HeadStuff podcast network. Each episode, I'll be chatting with a fabulous guest that you may know and answering your sex and relationship dilemmas. Nothing is off limits, so let's dive right in.
My guest for this episode is the genuinely fabulous Karla K. Karla is the co-host of podcast The Unpopular Opinion. She's a marketeer and beauty educator from Dublin. I originally followed Karla for her impressive, extensive makeup knowledge, but then I actually got hooked into her podcast and I actually came on to chat about sex education with herself and Jen Hatton. And I really loved that she was happy to delve into quite serious topics, but also have fun with the lighter stuff as well. So I thought she would be a perfect fit for the G-Spot, and I was not wrong. I loved getting into these dilemmas with her, and I think you will really value her insights. So have a listen and enjoy.
Can I just start by asking you, did you get sex education in school?
I did.
Okay. And what was it like?
It was a half day in 6th class. Now, I went to an all-girls, very small convent school.
Right. So did I.
Yeah. So that was it. Yeah. That was all that we were getting.
Yeah. A half day. So nothing in secondary school? Did you get anything then?
No.
Nothing at all?
No.
Really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was the same. We got a puberty periods talk, but most people I talked to, they got like something in secondary school, but it was minimal. It was kind of like the video, the TV being rolled in and some kind of tape.
Yeah, but that tape that we've all seen be memed like a million times.
Yeah. So nothing at all in secondary school, just like biology or something or whatever. Yeah.
Not that I can remember, and I really feel like I would.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Because I remember the first one.
Yeah, of course, you're probably mortified. So then, like, in the absence of getting like good, proper sex education, which is what we should have gotten, but look, here we are. Hopefully young people are getting better standard these days. Where did you learn about it? Like, was it a thing, you were able to talk about with friends, or was it like not really a topic on the table?
It was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
J17 magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a big one.
You've unlocked that. I haven't thought about that. Is that it's hardly still going? I haven't seen it on the shelves.
I don't think so.
No.
But
oh my God, I forgot about that.
That was a big one.
Yeah.
I actually learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
I would say I learned the majority of what I know from that.
Right, okay.
And then like the odd kind of copy of like Cosmo, if my mum had it.
Yeah.
I'd like flick through it and I'd be like, oh, go.
Yeah. I think I used to look at like now when the kind of tabloidy magazines and in the sex, like I suppose the sex dilemmas parts and stuff. But like that's not an education at all. It was just
but I suppose you can kind of pick up bits and bobs.
Yeah.
Like I think it was interesting because at the time that I was growing up, like I had Sky TV, do you know?
Yes,
so like there was kind of you'd see things in movies, you'd see there was like a lot more, I suppose, world out there than there would have been when I was like in primary school.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, I suppose, getting around that time. J17, I remember, as I said, like very specifically because they had a lot on kind of, there was a lot of like teen dilemmas. There was a lot of virginity talk. There was a lot of kind of, I suppose, like my boyfriend's pressuring me into this, and it was because it was American, wasn't it? It was American publication.
I think so.
Yeah.
Was it supposed to be like in theory for 17-year-olds?
Yeah.
I think I'm almost certain I wasn't allowed to get it when I was younger.
Oh, I was absolutely not allowed. I was absolutely not allowed.
But I do remember looking at it. But I was allowed to get, was it Kiss and Ms?
Ms. Oh, I love Ms.
I don't think there was any Ms was light. Kissing and stuff.
There was kind
like,
of
periods.
Heavy petting.
Yeah.
There would be a bit of that, like, and you'd be like, what does that mean?
I know, it's so vague, isn't it? It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah, you'd be like, that's crazy. I had I suppose I'd learn different bits from kind of different. I had a sister who was 3 years older than me.
Yeah.
So, and because we both had like a very similar hobby, we would be around the same crowd. So I suppose I'd be around older people quite often. And that would be from like stories or just kind of listening in and being like, oh, okay. And pretending I knew what was going on. I'd be like, I'm 100%. Oh, I know what that means. Actively taking it down in my diary. Yeah. It was a very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I think also particularly because of the schools that we were in as well, because I went all girls primary, all girls secondary.
Oh, really?
Both convent.
Yeah.
So I never was in a mixed school until fifth year. Fifth year is when I transferred schools. And by that time you kind of know enough. You know? By that time we were kind of up to scratch. The books thing is interesting as well, because there was a lot of books that, do you remember you used to get these books free? And they were always kind of smutty.
Where'd you get them free?
You'd get them free with like Glamour, or you get them free with like some kind of magazine.
They were like really small though, like the really skinny,
really kind of small, like novella ones. But I'd read anything. Like I was a reader as a teenager, I was a reader as a child. So again, that would be something that like you pick bits and pieces up.
Yeah.
But I do remember particularly like I was into horse riding when I was younger, and so was my sister. And a lot of you'd be around, like I'd be around a lot of men in like the yards and stuff like that, and they kind of goad you a little bit, being like, do you know what that means? And you'd be like, yeah.
Of course they do, yeah.
Sure. Like not a breeze.
Probably loads of innuendo going on that you didn't catch.
And again, like writing it down, being like, look that up later.
Yeah.
Figure out what that means.
Googling it and traumatizing yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what about yourself now? So you're obviously you're on a podcast about sex now. Obviously, I'm not interviewing you about your sex life in detail. You can share something if you want, but there's no pressure. But like, are you now like? Are you that friend in your friend groups that will openly talk about sex? Are you a bit more like, I talk about some things, not other things? Are you, I'm guessing you're not the kind of prudish pearl clutching type that you're here. Because every friend group has a little bit of a pearl clutcher.
There's someone who's a bit like, you've pushed them too far. And you're like, okay, that's fine. You're a little bit more private.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the friend group.
Yeah.
But I find like with some friends you can say anything to.
Yeah.
With some people that you wouldn't even be that close to, you're like, okay, that's the kind of the vibe that we have. I think what's interesting as well is my boyfriend, I've been with him for 10 years now, and he is British, and he has such a different experience of growing up talking about sex, growing up with sex, very like two different worlds completely. So I think from even communicating with him and talking with him about a lot of stuff, it's so interesting. It's like opened my eyes. I'm like, wow, you fully had to put the like condom on a banana. Like that's crazy to me. Wow. That is wild. I was like, I thought that was something in like Clueless. You know, I didn't think that was a thing. It was like, no. And like even from how casual sex is when he was growing up, how like talked about it was. He's a twin sister. He would talk to his sister about it. It was very, very different. But I suppose he grew up in an atheist household too. So
I was just about to say that he probably didn't have that Catholic kind of. And now my parents, like on paper they're Catholic, but they wouldn't have been hugely religious at all. Really, like we went to mass, but then I stopped.
Same
after.
as mine.
Yeah.
Like they're spiritual.
Yeah, grand. You know,
they did it to get me through the school. You know?
Exactly, but that's what it was. But even I suppose where he was growing up, if it was in England, that it wasn't maybe. Even though they have kind of, I think sometimes then that there is some. I think it was Cara Delevingne was saying this kind of. What way did she put it? It wasn't stiff upper lip, but it was something about like, we just don't talk about sex, you know. And I'm wondering, maybe there's some parts of.
I think that would be probably a lot to do with class system over there.
Right, yeah.
So where
that makes sense actually.
Yeah. So I suppose where my boyfriend grew up, he grew up, and I'm like, this is gas, but he grew up in a London overspill in a very in a kind of like in a council house area. So it was a lot more, I think that like stiff upper lip stuff, you'd hear that about like, you know, private boarding schools.
Okay,
that kind of stuff.
It's kind of
whereas it's like the more, I suppose, the more regular schools, the more regular kind of neighborhoods and villages and everything like that would be I think from what I know, I've lived over there, and from what I've learned from Tom, obviously, is it's a lot more relaxed. And And it's something that like he would have grown up speaking with his parents about, something that he would have grown up speaking with like his dad about, his mum about, his sister. I suppose being a twin though, and everybody having the same friends, that would be, you know, that would be kind of, that's a very difficult, very interesting thing. Versus me, it was like just not spoken about in my household whatsoever. Still wouldn't. It's gone too far now.
Right.
So like if my parents did try and open that conversation, I'd be like, now you've got, no.
The ship has sailed.
And it's like even the thoughts of them like actively watching this, I'd be like, no.
I was about to say, are you going to send this on to them? No.
I'd be like, you didn't open the door. So the door stays closed for you. We're not going to do this now.
No, we're not doing it now.
I'm in my 30s.
That's so funny. My boyfriend went to an all boys primary and secondary school. He's so funny. I remember him telling me, he was like, when I went to college, he was like, I know he had girlfriends, I believe, but I think one girlfriend for quite a long time. And then when he was in college, but had to like make friends that were girls and just socialise with girls in a different way, he was like, I didn't know what to talk to them about. He'd be like, do you like soccer? You know, like literally just trying to find something. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I went to an all girls primary, and I think when I got into secondary, it was mixed. But like boys, even at that point, they were just such an exotic thing to me. So mysterious. Like they're not at all. But you know, when you're a 13-year-old girl, you know, reading Marion Keyes or whatever, and you're looking at these boys and you haven't been that socialised with boys, it was like, wow, I was just amazed by them. I think, God knows why, but I was.
No, I think as well, I think that has a lot to do with like the time that we probably grew up. Like we're not like a million miles, like I'm 33.
I'm nearly 32,
So I'm like, we're not a million miles off each other in age. And I think at that point, we were growing up in a very bro culture. We were watching a lot of American media. We had kind of finally gotten access to more than 3 channels. We couldn't believe it. And it was very, as I said, it was kind of Clueless, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And it was always kind of pitched, I feel like it was almost nearly pitched that men had the power. So boys kind of had the power. If a boy fancied you, that was important. It didn't matter who a girl fancied. You would be lucky to kind of like get that affection returned. And that was, and it was kind of, but then it would also be in like friend groups where there was consistent, like you'd fancy this person and then the next week you fancy somebody else and then somebody else would kind of float in and then there'd be a new person, like a new girl or a new whatever. But it was always kind of, I feel like because of that time, that culture, if you even think about music, think about like how much misogynistic music was going on. Limp Bizkit, Eminem, like really hardcore women are shite.
Sluts basically.
Sluts
slut shaming
and whores
constantly.
and all this kind of stuff. So much references to oral. I was like, I feel like you weren't having it. I don't think you talk that much about something. You're really talking about oral here. We're getting into it. But I think it was a very interesting time. It was like you knew everything about these celebrities and what they were wearing. That's all that you saw in these magazines as well. And it was kind of drilled into us that it was like, well, you can't wear this and you can't do that and you can't do all of these, I suppose, all of these things. And as much as I'd say if any guy was listening to this, they'd be like, no, girls always held the power. That wasn't the way that it was positioned. But then I grew up in an all-girls school, so how I had no point of reference, you know?
That's really interesting even to think about the media, as you say, and how that plays into it. And I'm thinking even of, you know, the early noughties, like golden era of like Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, all of these starlets, even that word, you know, just the media like constantly trying to just destroy them, you know, and they were young girls having a good time. They weren't even doing any. Now, obviously, maybe there was a bit of
drinks,
drunk driving and stuff, which obviously we're not endorsing, but like, you know, they were growing up in a crazy time, in a mad time to even be getting famous as a young woman in the noughties. And it was just really the body shaming, the slut shaming, and I'm sure we absorbed a lot of that, you know.
Well, I read something really interesting. I can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about post-Clinton era and after the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And that is when we went hyper Christianized. That's when and all of our media came from there. Like it was either the UK or the US, but the US seemed so glamorous and so cool and so different. We were watching like The Hills was popular, Laguna Beach, like all of these things. We were like learning about like teenagers and different, and look at like even the uptake of like the Disney Channel, Nickelodeon. It was all that was kind of shoved down our throats. So I honestly can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about post Lewinsky, and it was like that's where America really had to knuckle down and go pretty conservative again. And it was like Bush came in, and it was really kind of like, you know, strong Christian values, and this is how an American family is, and we are very, you know, a boy, a girl, 2 parents, a household.
Yeah.
And it was all very, you know, on our women are for marriage, and our men are, you know, for working. And it was kind of re-promoting this. Yeah. It was almost like they felt like they'd lost the way because their president had a sex scandal.
Yeah.
And as we know, it was Monica Lewinsky who took the fall for that.
Yeah.
So
she was treated horrendously.
Horrendously. I think that dictated a lot of what went on in the media and how they could get away with it. Because now looking back, I'm like, how did they get away with this? This is crazy. Even things as like Miley Cyrus, this is even later. This is like 2008, 2009, I want to say. And when she did the Kids' Choice Awards, and she's like being carted around on like this ice cream thing, but there's a pole. So she's hanging onto the pole.
Right, yeah.
And she does like a little bit of a drop and an up, but she's in like jeans and cowboy boots and like a very normal. And that still to this day is like an emblem of what went wrong, her downfall. She did a slut drop on a pole, and there were so many complaints, and that's how much it was like attuned to us. It was like, you can't look sexual, you can't dress sexual or what can be considered sexual. And then even if you do, you have to watch everything that's going on and the way that you're presented in any way, shape or form that you might become less desirable to your husband.
Yeah.
And it was just this promotion consistently of getting your husband. What's your husband going to think?
Yeah.
Save yourself for your husband.
I know. I hate it.
Yeah.
And it's so confusing as a girl or a young woman, because you have this side where you are expected to be like fuckable essentially, and desirable and sexy, but you have the balance is just like, you know, there's a hair in it, and the other side then is like, you're a slut, you're unworthy, you're, you know, we were talking about body counts in one of the episodes, I think, just like we only really talk about that when it comes to women, like, you
absolutely,
know, and it was just confusing. But it's such a good point that you bring up the media side of it, because often like I talk about porn and stuff, but even actually just the mainstream like media. And it still is very American. Like it's a domino effect. Like it comes over here, a ripple effect even. Yeah. Well, on that note, we can go into a dilemma about kink, because that's something I think that there's still a lot of taboo about, even though lots of people have kinks.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in episode 1, I have never found a satisfier toy that I haven't enjoyed. And my pick this week is super fun, easy to use, feels amazing. You pop it into your underwear. It stays put very comfortably using built-in magnets. And don't worry, the magnet attaches to the fabric, not your bits. And you can then control the vibrations either using your phone or the little button attached. You can enjoy it at home, solo, or with a partner, or in public if you want to make that dinner date, train journey, or Sunday mass a bit more interesting. It's called The Sexy Secret from Satisfyer, and you can get 10% off yours by using the discount code GRACE10 on playblue.ie. Enjoy!
So this is a long one, right? This is a bit of a longer than the other dilemmas. So, hi Grace, my dilemma is about a kink that my partner has that I'm definitely not into. We've been together for 5 years and have had what I think is a good sex life. I was always under the impression that both of us enjoyed it equally. Recently, we played a kind of sex talk game. You could ask your partner any question from a list and then ask you a question. Sounds fun. We were after a few drinks when we played it, so maybe he was feeling braver, and he shared that he has a kink he has never told me about. Whatever I thought that kink might be, it definitely wasn't what I expected. He has a humiliation kink. I was a little speechless, and he obviously clammed up in response to my shock, so the conversation ended. But I wanted to understand. So a few days later, I asked him to give me some examples of what this kink might look like. Basically, he wants to be degraded. So he wants me to call him cruel names, make fun of his body and sexual performance, taunt him, and even be quite physically rough with him. Although I grew up in post-Catholic Ireland like the rest of us and can't say that I'm completely free of sexual shame, I do try to be as open-minded as I can be. But now that there's a kink in my own relationship, which is in capital letters, my own relationship, I'm struggling. I've absolutely no interest in humiliating. I've absolutely no interest in humiliating my partner, even as a role play. In fact, I think it would be a huge turn off. I don't want to shame my partner or make them feel bad for their desires, but I can't ignore the fact that this revelation has changed something between us. I worry that if I don't indulge their kink, they'll feel unfulfilled or resentful, but the thought of participating in something that doesn't align with my own desires makes me feel uncomfortable and even disgusted, if I'm honest. I love my partner deeply and I want them to be happy, but I also don't want to sacrifice my own needs and boundaries in the process. And the question, is there a way we can still have a good sex life and relationship even if this kink goes unfulfilled? So that's a big one.
Yeah.
What's your initial knee-jerk, gut response when you're hearing this?
My initial response is, you don't know until you try.
Okay, yeah.
But I also, at the end where she's like, I need to respect my own boundaries, I think it's such a scale. It can be anything from like urination, which would be like a little bit like stronger.
Yeah.
Physical. Like levels of kind of like physicality and I suppose, I wouldn't want to say abuse, but like of that level of kind of like, that would become violent. Or it could be, again, just a couple of like name calling. It could be something that's kind of, I suppose, a little bit softer. So this is something that when it's a kink and it's a fantasy, you'd want to know how much has been explored on his end first.
Yes.
Does he have very specifics? I know he's named kind of a couple of things there, but has that happened, or is it just the idea of it?
Yeah.
Because I think thinking and doing are two completely different things. And I always use the threesome analogy when I think about kink, because anyone I know who has had a threesome are like, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
But if you ever, like, anyone I know who's had a threesome is like, cut the cameras. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's not good. But then the idea of it again is like pitched to us as like, wow, this is incredible. This is like kinky. This is a very different thing altogether. But honestly, anyway, so I'm like, is it a case of, has he explored that before? If he has, does he know exactly what he likes, or is it something that he's just kind of, he thinks he likes the idea of?
Yes. That's something I'm unclear on as well. So I'm glad you said that, because so they've been together for 5 years. Okay, so if he's had a relationship before, or even just has very literally indulged in this kink and enjoyed this kink in real life, let's say, not just outside of fantasy, that's one thing, right? And that's kind of maybe a bit of a different discussion than, you know, it's something I've been thinking about and fantasizing about, and that excites me. Or maybe I watch porn where this stuff is happening and that excites me. And as you said, what way did you put it? The thought of something versus the reality, very different.
Of it is so different.
It is, and do you know what? Sometimes it does turn out to be amazing, but fantasy, by its very term, is the whole point, or not the point, but the whole what's their benefit? Kind of the real beauty of fantasy is like, you're in control. You're in the director's chair. It's all happening in your brain. Everything's happening smoothly and fabulous. And they're saying all the right things that you want them to say at exactly the right time. You know, if you've ever asked your partner to do something and they do it and you're like, no, not like that.
Yeah.
And you have to be really specific because it's subjective. So that's actually, I think, a really good starting point is to kind of, maybe they have talked about this, but I'm not sure, you know, have that conversation of where, you know, what is your experience with this so far?
Yes. And
if it is a fact that it is at this point still something that he's not acted on, I'm with you to a point on, you don't know till you try. That would be my general line for most things. Now, I'm very open-minded myself, I think. Not everyone is. I guess there's ways you can compromise as well with kink.
And I think compatibility in a relationship and sexual compatibility is something that isn't spoken about. Like, we're so used to being like, is it compatible with like my dreams, my morals, my future, my goals? But like, your sex life and your that physical intimacy side is as important as something to kind of like talk about and consistently check in.
Yeah.
Something that you were into 2 years ago might not be something that you're into now.
Yeah.
Something that you used to really like might be something that you've kind of like, either you're done with, or it's out of your system, or it's just not something you enjoy anymore. And I think having I think it's great that they had a really nice, open and honest discussion. I think it's really tough because your first reaction is all that he's probably going to remember for a while. So you feel like you're cartwheeling back on yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's like you don't want to compromise. And again, I don't think that anybody should have to compromise what they like. But there's levels of things that you might do that might fulfill that level of humiliation that probably don't affect you that much.
Yeah.
Like even small things that I know of, like foot stealing, you know?
Yeah.
Those kind of things, you know, rude language. There's little things that might not make you feel like you're like, ugh, grim.
Yeah.
There's small things. But I also think that you need to like work on that. As you said, like the relationship seems to be great and they're able to be open and have these conversations, and they feel themselves that they're not a prude and they feel like they're quite open. But I think, again, it's that thought process. Like if somebody came to me and was like, I have a humiliation kink, I'd be like, okay, I'm not into it. But then I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do I know that? So it's that kind of level, I suppose, of exploration and working on what is that boundary.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of have to work through all different, there's lots of ways to tackle this. Is it a case that if is it a need in him that's going to stay?
Yeah.
Is it going to be something that festers? Is it something that he would like as an add-on to his sex life? Or is it something that, I suppose, directs his sex life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I was thinking was, you know, if she was willing to try some stuff, like it doesn't have to be every time you have sex. You can have that boundary where, okay, I don't know, once a month or every third time roughly we have sex, we do it your way, essentially. Now, within your own boundaries. And I think something you're touching on there is something we talk about with consent education is the difference between willing and wanting. And if you want to do something that's straightforward, what it says in the tin, you want to do it, happy days, great, okay? There might be some stuff you're willing to do, as you said, that, you know, it's not your thing. It's not necessarily going to turn you on, but you're comfortably willing to do it for your partner. Now, then, if we're veering into really reluctantly willing to do it, that's something I would be reflecting on more and saying, okay, don't go into that area without really kind of considering how you feel about it. If it's really crossing some lines for you. It's reminded me of a scene. Have you watched Sex and the City?
No.
Okay. Well, there's a part in it where Carrie is dating he's a politician of some kind. And anyway, he wants her to pee on him. And she's just not having it. Like, she's not into it at all. And she's like, I could like pour some warm tea on you. He's just
finding all these ways out of it.
I know.
Yeah.
It's just to remind you of that when you're like, compromise. But like, it is, you know, if we think of even different sexual acts, like, say choking is something that we see a lot. It happens a lot in porn, and people don't realize there's no perfectly safe way to do it, but there's definitely unsafe ways to do it. So you don't push down on the windpipe. That's really dangerous. You just squeeze the side of the neck. But again, this is all adults communicating, whatever. But if you really don't want to choke your partner, it's just like, I really just absolutely not, don't want to do it. You know, maybe put your hand around their jaw, do you know, or somewhere else. It's not necessarily about the physical acts. It's about tapping into that feeling that excites him. And as you said, that could be done in lots of different ways. Maybe they go out and she flirts with someone else in front of him, and that is a kick for him. So maybe just the examples he's given are the ones where she's like having quite the reaction to.
Exactly.
More
and
options.
Like even financial humiliation. I'm on board.
Anybody want to do a bit of that?
Yeah, anybody has a financial humiliation kink, let me know. I will be there, bells on.
How do these gals get sorted with these? Is it Findom? Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah.
I'm just now maybe I shouldn't be making a joke. I'm not making a joke of it. I actually each their own. I don't think there's anything wrong with the kink. I'm just like, again, how can
I take part? And again, the idea, I think I would like to take part. Yeah. And then if it came down to it, I'd probably be running for the hills. But it just, and these is like, you don't know your boundaries until you've tried it. I've had so many conversations with partners before where they've told me they're into something, and then when it comes down to actually figuring out what that would look like or what that is, that's not it at all.
Exactly.
That's not it even slightly.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking away from what this partner thinks that they want and that they enjoy.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's such a simplistic line, you don't know until you try, but there's different levels to that kind of
exactly
trying.
Yeah.
And I think, again, back to that compatibility, is this something that's like festering, or is this something that's dominating their sexual relationship? What's that going to look like coming like down the line? And then unfortunately, if it's something that is so dominant, that's a mismatch, and that's not a small thing to end a relationship over.
Is it a deal breaker is kind of what I'm thinking. Like, is what you're saying as well, right? Is it a deal breaker for him, for her, for both? Because one thing I learned in my sex coaching course is we learned about core desires, and that's essentially the erotic and emotional fulfillment that sex brings you. So it's not actually really about the physical acts, whatever. It's about, say for me, maybe I want to be really submissive, and that's what I find so exciting. And that gives me that, it's a core desire. Like, it's something you can't unlearn it's part of your sexual identity. It's part of your sexual fingerprint, for want of a better term. And if you're in a relationship where your core desires are not being met consistently, there's a few different options. And according to my lectures, I'm not saying this is set in stone, but they felt that you can either stay in the relationship and keep going, but resentment will probably build. This is how affairs can happen. This is how just relationships can fracture over time. You can, what they said is, outsource unethically. This is very fancy language. Basically, that's cheating. If you're unethically outsourcing, it's you're fulfilling the desire outside of the relationship without agreeing.
Okay.
Or outsource ethically. And what that basically means is finding ways outside of your partner and your relationship to fulfill those desires. And that doesn't actually necessarily need to be sexual, because I know in the kink community, like, this guy could go to a kink, or have a play partner, or go to, there's different settings, and he could be asked to be degraded and then go home and have sex with his partner. You know what I mean? He doesn't actually necessarily have to go and have sex with someone else, unless he feels, again, that is key.
And that was going to be my next suggestion. I'm like, you can explore what that means as well, because if you're not into it, but you're happy for them to explore it and understand what that means consensually, by all, that's not, we're sold this kind of, I think in a monogamous relationship, and I'm going to assume this is a monogamous relationship.
Like it is.
Kind of sounds like it is. There has to be, it's very like blanket. It's like a yes or a no. It's like this or that. But I also think that people are varied and they are consistently changing. We all are.
I do think her heart's in the right place, in the sense that she's not trying to shame him. She's not saying it's disgusting. She's just saying she feels it's really not for her. And obviously the relationship means a lot to her. So I think, this could be something to discuss with like a kink-friendly therapist, couples therapist. Because some therapists, no shade at all, but like they just haven't had training in that area, and we can pathologize kink as well, whereas kink is absolutely fine.
Oh, and
everyone
it's natural.
has different kinks,
and everyone,
really.
and as you said, they change. Consistently.
And
I really want to respect, I think they should respect their own boundaries.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is, but it's one of those, those are a couple of things that would automatically come to mind if this was my dilemma. If somebody, if I was sitting in the same position and my partner came to me and we were kind of having this conversation, I'd be like, okay, like I have to almost take my brain out of it and be like, what I thought I knew versus now I'm about to enter an arena which I'm a beginner. I don't really, all I've seen is from porn and heard from bits and bobs through social. And through the way that and because I've never looked it up, I don't know anything about it really. So I think but there's lots to do there. And I think, as you said, like the monogamy part of it, we're so possessive of our partners, I feel like.
We really are. Like,
Yes. And I think that there's so much out there to be explored. You might not want to do the exploring. But they might want to. And it's like, you can put that down to food. You can say that with travel. You can say that with anything in life. You can say that with any hobby or, I suppose, pastime. There's just so much to it. So I don't believe, I think that our ideals have to change a little bit. I think we have to unlearn a lot of stuff, and it's really frustrating that we have to unlearn all this stuff.
It's really hard. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And I think what's great about this day and age is people are exploring therapy a lot more openly. People are exploring their mental health a lot more openly, and those things add to it.
Oh, hugely. If you're, worried about your sex life or not feeling enough or feeling too much, that's the other thing. Even for this guy, if he's feeling unfulfilled, and he's probably feeling some shame and guilt because of her initial reaction, which is, again, not to shame her. These are the emotions that come up.
That's human,
we're human.
Isn't it?
I was just about to say, we're human. That can really affect you. And it's funny because actually a lot of guys are into, which goes against completely what mainstream porn and media will tell you, but loads of men are into being submissive and humiliation and degradation. And I think, again, a lot of the appeal of this is because it's flipping the script. It's because every day they feel they have to provide and be, maybe, I don't know, is dominant the word, but be, kind of in control and like whatnot. And then in the bedroom, they get to flip that in its head almost. Yeah. And have someone else take control.
And also lovely. Sometimes it's nice having that choice taken, like that level of, I suppose.
It's freeing.
Yeah, it is really freeing. And I think you could go really deep and down into that kind of web of like whys and hows and how we kind of got there. But I think there's more than one correct answer for that situation. And again, if we just normalised kink, we wouldn't be so shocked by it. If we just spoke a little bit more openly. But at the same time, if you want it to be private, that's fine. But just, I think resource is massive.
Definitely. There is a brilliant kink educator for anyone listening called Aoife Murray. And I think it's
I love her.
Yeah, Aoife Murray is fabulous. I learned so much from her. Aoife Murray Life, I think, is her Instagram handle. So check her out. And there's way more resources out there now. Okay, so we have libido lows. Hey Grace, I'm a 30-year-old woman and I've been married to my husband for 8 years. Lately, I've been struggling with my libido and it's putting a strain on our relationship. I used to have what I felt was a healthy appetite for sex, but for the past year, I just haven't been feeling it. It's not that I'm not attracted to my husband or that there's anything wrong with our relationship. It's like my body just doesn't respond the way it used to. It kind of feels switched off. I never initiate, but I do agree to have sex about once a month. I kind of just go through the motions and make lots of noise to make him think I'm enjoying it, in the hopes this will satisfy him to some degree. My husband has been incredibly supportive, but I can see how my lack of interest is affecting him. He has started to feel rejected and insecure, and I hate that I'm causing him pain. I've tried changing my diet, exercising more, scheduling more date nights, but I'm not noticing any difference. We even tried a challenge we saw on Reddit that told us to have sex every day for 10 days to get things going again. We managed 2 days and I could not face a third. I have something to say about that in a minute. I want to feel desire again, both for my sake and for my husband's, but I'm at a loss for what to do. How do I reignite the spark and overcome this low libido without damaging our relationship further? Right, Reddit challenges first of all, because they've come up a few times. Again,
have they? I've never seen one.
I know.
I feel like I'm missing out.
I know. Or like have sex for 30 days or have sex every day, and that way you kind of get back into it. And I'm like, that's, I just know.
That's crazy.
I feel like that's like, like, what's the word? Steamrolling over the problem, like through the problem. It's not actually addressing what's going on.
The pressure would kill me alone. Yeah. The pressure alone, thinking,
who has time? Who has energy 10 days in a row?
If I have to go to the shop, I'm like, oh no.
I know.
I can imagine.
I know.
And then you just come home and have sex for the next 30 days. Oh, Jesus. Like, can you imagine?
30 days.
30 days?
No.
Sure.
I can't. So look, basically, don't feel any shame that didn't work for you, because I don't know anyone that would work for, because it's not really a thing. One thing that's popping up for me here just to say is, I've tried changing my diet, exercising more, scheduling more date nights. Change your diet, exercise more. It's not that they're bad things. I mean, obviously, there could be any reason aside from that she's doing it and our diet can change. Exercise is obviously good. We know exercise is good for us in many ways, and it is good for libido. But usually, in my experience from working with people whose libido has reduced, because I don't like saying low libido because, again, it's subjective. What is a low or high libido? But if it's reduced noticeably and it's affecting them, it's usually not down to something like that they're not exercising or their diet, or something that could be just changed like that. It's usually more layered. Mm-hmm. And she has said she is attracted to him, which I hear all the time. Like, And I believe her because I think that's the first thing we go to sometimes if libido is lower on either partner is, oh, they're not attracted to me anymore. Or I'm not doing it for them.
Because we're told that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're told that consistently.
Because we're told that is the only way really that kind of attraction is expressed is through.
And we're told that like when men are not interested, it's because they're cheating.
Yeah. Oh, or gay.
Oh, gay is a big one as well. Must be gay.
Yeah.
Don't think so. Thank you though for that epic suggestion. And thanks a
million for nothing.
Thank you for reducing sexuality to that.
Yeah.
But sure, I think, look, we're never going to get to the bottom of like why we've been kind of told these things.
Yeah.
And also we're told somebody like, you know, men hit their sexual peak in their 20s, women hit their sexual peak in their 30s. We're like, there's all this information. It's a lot to get through and it's a lot to figure out what works. One of the smallest things that I have seen, and I thought it was such like great advice, is that we know that sexuality is a spectrum, but we also know that like feelings of passion and feelings of any kind of sexual desire is a spectrum. So why do we expect, because I'm horny, you're horny right now too. Yeah. So the two of us are horny. Like that is such a that's such a very specific time. Like there's things that we do know. We all know that we get hungry at around a certain time, but there's lots of people who don't. You know. But something that I saw in a piece of advice, and it was something that like switched in my brain. I was like, why have I never thought that way before? And it was some guy on social media, and he was talking about, I think he might have been a sex expert, Cam Fraser.
Yeah, I love Cam.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
He's brill. And I think he was on a podcast. And he was saying about some people take 2 seconds to be turned on. Yeah. Some people take hours. Yeah. Days. And that is a massive thing, particularly if he was like, it's like the first thing I think that he said that he kind of recommends to people is that sex is not spontaneous. Why was it sold to us as it should be? And that it could take me 7 hours to kind of get up to to switch on my libido, to switch on that kind of level of me where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm in it. And that takes so much pressure off everybody. And also if it's for, say, your partner, and you'll kind of know yourself, you'll like, after experimenting with this for a while, you'll kind of understand that. Yeah. And you'll know, like, it takes me no time at all. The suggestion is enough for me. Exactly. But it might take this person 7 or 8 hours. So therefore, have the conversation. I'd like to have sex tomorrow. Yeah. Why don't we have sex this weekend? Yeah. And it gets that kind of thought process going on. And if it's kind of a state of panic, then you know to maybe try something else. Yeah. But if it's a state of, okay, then you can kind of work yourself up to that. So it doesn't, or it could be a case where, again, if you know your partner, you know what their libido is like, and you know, like if it's a quick thing, you can say, okay, I'd like to have, I'm not going to say it to him, but I'd like to have sex tonight. So I'm going to kind of like get my head around that. Yeah. Start feeling that. Yeah. Start doing the things that make me tap into that. Exactly. Start start, expressing myself and working. And I don't think you should have to work your way up to physical intimacy. I think that's a lot of pressure for anyone. But I think it's a good thing in some scenarios where you kind of have to be like, okay, let me think about this. Let me really get into it. Because it's so, like, libido is always going to go up and down. And we hear it all the time. It's like, you get married and you stop having sex. This is the reason why I haven't gotten married. You start having kids and you stop having sex. And I'm like, okay, no, let's just think about the factors. It's not about that part. It's actually about all the factors and how much people's lives changed. Yeah. And to be able to fit like something that, like, say if you were somebody who like had sex every second day with their husband or with their partner or with anyone, you had sex every second day. You get a new job. That routine doesn't work anymore. But the first thing that you're going to do is throw out the stuff that you find is, say, unnecessary. And a lot of the times physical intimacy is top level.
It's down the list, like, it gets pushed down.
You're not going to be like most important thing. But then there's a lot of people in relationships who are like, this is, and I find, do you watch MAFS? Yeah. I find it hilarious. One of the funniest things ever, because people really think they know their levels of like how important sex is to them until it actually comes down to it. Yeah. Because what's important to you right now is not important to you in 6 months, a year, changes. 5 years. That changes. It's just hard to cope with that in a relationship with somebody else where their expectation changes too. And it's like the meeting of the minds is going to be the hardest part. Yeah. Yeah. And that, like, and I think, again, we're sold so many lies about, like, what libido is. As you said, physical exercise, that's great for everyone.
Yeah.
Not denying that.
Yeah.
That's a great thing for everybody too.
It's not going to suddenly ignite a burning desire to have sex. Like, it's just not. It can be one of many other factors that make you feel, maybe it makes you feel better in yourself because it boosts your mood, and therefore that increases the chances that you might feel like having sex. But we have to look at it really holistically.
Yeah.
And it's not just physical changes at all. In fact, sometimes it's not even physical changes at all. And I think she said, like, for the past year, I haven't been feeling it. You know, if this lady was coming to me for a session, I'd be like, right, let's rewind. Like, let's look at the past year, what's been going on. Let's look at your life holistically. How are you feeling about your body? How are your stress levels? How's your stress management? How are you feeling about your partner? Not even just the physical attraction. Are you feeling supported? Do you have, I don't mean equal, like literally 50%, but have you, you know, your labor in the relationship, is it divided in a fair way?
Yeah.
Are you, you know, or are you finding you have to do loads and, you know what I mean, carry a lot of weight, and then you're feeling resentful towards him, so obviously you don't want to have sex with him, then that's a whole other conversation. What else? You know, again, like, stress management is something as well that hugely feeds into sex, and mindfulness, in the sense that we have such, like, I suppose, busy lives. Even if you're not busy per se, even if you're sitting at home all day, you're probably on your phone, you're on screens. There's things grabbing and pulling our attention all the time. So it can be sometimes hard for desire to even, like,
get in there,
sneak in there.
How is it going to get in there?
Yeah. And as you said, it's at the bottom of the list sometimes. So, you know, when she said scheduling date nights, one thing people do that, you know, I'm always like, don't do this, is they schedule a date night. This automatically becomes this loaded, kind of pressurized event. Yeah. They have a meal or whatever. I just want to sleep after a meal. They wait till the end of the night to have sex, and then neither of them feel like it. I'm like, it's a nice idea to have date nights. You should date each other. Yeah. But the dating can be separate to the sex.
And I also think that it could be a lot to do with there's lots of ways to be physically intimate.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be penetrative sex. So maybe sit in and have that conversation with your partner, being like, is there other things?
Yeah.
Something even like assisted masturbation. Is there, like, there's loads of stuff that can happen where they're satisfied, you've been with them, so you've, like, partaken in some kind of way in the act, and that might be enough.
Yeah. Exactly.
To get you to a point where you're feeling a little bit better, because it's such a, like, I mean, at the moment our lives are so stressful, so busy. We are more social than ever without being face to face. Like, we are, like, talking to our friends all day. We're like online, we're on social media, we're kind of consuming all this other stuff. As you said, how's desire supposed to slip in? But also it could be the case, like, is it that classic penetrative sex that is the thing that you're like, that's a lot for me to work up to right now? Would it, there's lots of other things that you can kind of explore when it comes to that level that will also give satisfaction. So is it, maybe you're just not up for that right now, or you're up for other things? Also, I think that there's a real pressure on sex to look a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
And to be a certain way. And it to be like, and this is it. And it doesn't stop until we've both climaxed. And, you know, and then we just keep moving forward. And it's such a frustrating way to, like, I don't know how people live their lives that way.
But it's so limiting.
Yeah.
And like that, like, even with penetration, it's seen as this, in the hierarchy of sex acts, it's seen as the kind of holy grail. And, like, to be honest, that comes mostly from more men, like, because not that women don't like penetration, everyone likes different things, but we know it's obviously clitoral stimulation that for most women is where a lot of the pleasure is, but also all your erogenous zones all over the body, the lead up, the tease, the kissing, like, all of that is sex, and it's sexual and it's intimate. And, you know, I would even, on that point, I would even say to this lady, actually take sex off the table for a few months. If it's not happening anyway, or no, actually, sorry, she says it is happening and she's faking it, and please
don't do that.
Just don't do it. It's not fair on you. It's not fair on it's not fair on either of you. It's not going to actually help with anything. It's going to actually, your body's going to want sex even less. If you're not even actually enjoying it when you're doing it. So maybe take sex off the table. And once it's off the table, she might find herself actually wanting to kiss more, or to touch or to flirt or to like, you know, heavy petting, as we said earlier, because she's not worried, oh, this is going to lead to a whole thing now where we actually have to have penetrative sex.
Yeah. And flirting is so rare.
Yeah.
No one flirts anymore. Why is no one flirting anymore? You have to. It's like such a it's such a fun part.
Yeah, it is.
It's part of the chase. Like it's part of the like actually interesting part. Like one of the more interesting parts, I suppose, of a relationship, I would say. And again, I think the problem is that we're always, and it's always like, as a woman, you're going to experience really low libido, and now, in all fairness to women, we go through a lot of hormone changes, a lot of stuff going on there, and also the perception of like what a modern day woman is consistently changing, and I don't think it's getting better for us. So it's like it's tough.
There's just more being added to the plate, really, I feel,
and it's hard also being the educator. Like it's hard actually having to come to the party and be like, look, I'm not feeling it. I do fancy you. I know you don't feel like I fancy you right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you to trust me on that and kind of take a blind leap of faith. But this isn't getting better. We're now having sex once a month. I'm not enjoying it. And he probably is picking, well, you never know, but he is probably picking up on that a little bit.
Well, he should be at the very least, because unless, you know, you're a really good actress or you're not really connecting that much during the experience, because you know when someone's not really into it. I hope.
And that's not sustainable.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And that's kind of tricky. And I think that's where you kind of get to that point. I don't think there's not a quick fix for libido. I don't know one person where they've been like, yeah, I went to one counselling session. No, I'm sorted.
No.
Or I read one article
or a magic pill or a supplement. No.
It's trial and error for so many different things. And I think that the only thing that I know that I was like, wow, that really changed my perception was that kind of like intimacy trigger. Or it was like those thoughts and kind of building yourself up to it. But again, sex sometimes doesn't have to be this built up.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is, as we were saying earlier, kind of just told it has to happen this often in a
this
relationship,
in
this linear way, and it should always be in the evening.
I don't know why. You have the least energy in the evening. In the evening, I'm like, oh, I just want to watch Netflix, or I just want to like switch. I want to power down now.
Sleepy girl.
Yeah. Very sleepy. I'm like, catch me maybe in the morning. Afternoon is a lovely time.
Afternoon's perfect. Do you both work from home?
I was about to say we're working from home more. I'd also recommend Come As You Are, incredible book by Emily Nagoski. Now, I recommend everyone reads it, regardless of if they're having this issue or not, because it is just groundbreaking around the science of sex, particularly around women. And the focus is on pleasure. And that's what Emily found from all her research and everything, that the more we focus on sex and how many times we have it, etc., we suck the fun out of it. We suck the curiosity, the playfulness, all the stuff that it's supposed to bring to our lives. Yeah. Focus on pleasure. It sounds like you're not even having, the sex you are having isn't actually pleasurable emotionally or physically for you. So focusing on how can I have better quality experiences. And she also touches on desire being, I think what Cam was saying is linked into this in a way. Some people have spontaneous desire where they just get spontaneously horny, and some people are responsive where there's a much slower build up. They need to actually experience touch and pleasure first, and then they get there. So even instead of saying, okay, we have to have sex on Saturday, say, why don't we have some time in bed on Saturday and just leave it at that? Get naked, get into bed, have a cuddle, and if nothing happens, it's actually okay. Yeah. It's still an intimate time. And also book a session with me. Yeah.
You've just got to plug that in.
But to be fair, this is, I would say, 50% of what I see. Really? That dilemma is, I would say 50%, roughly half of the women that come to me are in that position or something very similar to it. So there's loads to be done. It's not a quick fix, but there's lots of tools, there's lots of resources, and it's about completely rethinking sex, desire, all of that stuff. It's not how it happens in... And I know that sounds really condescending, but I don't mean it in that way when I say it's not like it is in the movies. I have to remind myself at times.
It really isn't.
It's really not. Into the brain.
And it's, and particularly I find it interesting because book talk has kind of become huge. TikTok for books. And it's been really empowering for women, I feel, in a way, because women are now able to talk about the fact that they like smutty books.
Yeah.
But then also the men found out about it. And it was like, this is porn. This is the same thing. And I was like, oh, you're like ratting on yourself. Yeah. You're ratting on yourself by saying that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you think a certain way about porn. You've told it, like, you're not telling me anything about me.
Yeah.
You're only admitting your own biases when you're talking about this.
Yeah.
So I think that, but it's been amazing. I think it's been so interesting to see like this community of women be like, no, I'm going to talk openly about this book and like what I thought was good about it, what sex scenes I enjoyed, what like, and I, like, it's really funny because there's a couple of creators, and there's one, she's just had her 5th kid, and she's like, well, I read so much smut, of course, you know, like it's great to see kind of women, I suppose, have that, like, it's a new area, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I found that I was kind of like really interesting, because it was almost like a re-education for a lot of people. And I think anything like that is good. How could that be bad?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, long may it continue. And I think it's great for women even to use that and figure out about their own desires and kinks or fantasies or any of that. Again, it can only be a good thing.
Sure.
So, no, fantastic. Thank you so much, Karla. I really appreciate it. Such an open, I think, positive, hopefully sex positive conversation. Do you want to just share like where people can find you to finish off?
Sure. So you can find me on most social media as Karla K Artistry. I have my own podcast called The Unpopular Opinion, and those episodes come out every Sunday for public feeds, and then we also have a Patreon where we have episodes every Monday as well. So you can find me on either of those channels.
It's a brilliant podcast. I was binging it recently. It's fantastic. So give her a follow. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.
A huge thank you to Playblue, Ireland's favourite adult store, for sponsoring this episode of The G-Spot. You can browse through their impressive selection of toys, lingerie, and lots more sexy essentials at playblue.ie.
This show is part of the HeadStuff Podcast Network, a hub for the creative and the curious. Shows are produced in association with HeadStuff and the Podcast Studios Dublin. Find out more or become a member at headstuffpodcasts.com.